So I don't fit in. That's hell. It's hell when you can't be around your peers. All my life I grew up around black people, poor people, but I can't live around poor people now because they'll rob me. And why would they rob me? Because they're starving, because there's no money.
He didn't need a stage to become an icon, didn't need a crown to be called a king. Tupac was born into poverty, raised amidst uprisings, and rose above stray bullets and stage lights, only to discover the most dangerous thing wasn't hostility from the outside. It was betrayal from the very place that once raised him. Before being murdered at the age of 25, Tupac had sold tens of millions of records, starred in several major films, signed multi-million-dollar contracts, and become the most powerful voice of a forsaken generation. He was at the peak of his fame, wealthy, celebrated, glorified, when he was suddenly shot on the streets of Las Vegas in a luxury car with multiple bodyguards behind him. Yet no one saw who pulled the trigger. Who really killed Tupac? A gang, a kingpin, a conspiracy bigger than all of them. Follow the channel to trace each clue, because the answer might have been right in front of us all along. We just haven't dared to look it in the eye. The clues may have begun the moment he was born. On the night of September 13th, 1996, Tupac Amaru Shakur took his final breath in the intensive care unit of the University Medical Center of Nevada, 6 days after being shot 4 times at a red light intersection in Las Vegas. His death at the age of 25 became one of the most enduring mysteries in the history of American pop culture. Who pulled the trigger? Who stood behind the smoky haze of bullets that pierced the Nevada night? Perhaps to understand the answer more clearly, we need to return to the beginning. The place where Tupac was born, not just in flesh, but in destiny. Because there are people who, from the moment they let out their first cry, already carry within them the mark of a battle they cannot escape. Tupac was born on June 16, 1971, at Harlem Hospital, New York, in the heart of the slums where race and politics were never two separate concepts. His birth name was Lisane Parrish Crooks, a name that was short-lived because less than a year later, his mother Afeni Shakur changed it to Tupac Amaru Shakur, in memory of an 18th century Peruvian warrior who led an uprising against Spanish colonialists and was brutally executed. Tupac Amaru, in the Quechua language, means shining serpent, a symbol of rebirth. Even his name was a painful prophecy, glory and resistance, bloodshed and light. Afeni was no ordinary mother. She was a prominent member of the Black Panther Party, the radical leftist political movement of African Americans during the 1960s and 70s. While pregnant with Tupac, she was arrested and prosecuted along with 20 others in the Panther 21 case, accused of plotting to bomb government buildings in New York. From the womb, Tupac became acquainted with a prison cell. It was there that Afeni defended herself in court and won, being acquitted just a month before giving birth. Tupac grew up without the presence of his biological father. The man he recognized as his father was Mutulu Shakur, his stepfather, also a Black Panther leader, later placed on the FBI's most wanted list for participating in a bank robbery and helping to free political prisoner Assata Shakur, Tupac's famed godmother. Every relative of his was tied to guns, surveillance, revolutionary struggle, or death. They were living symbols, but also enormous shadows looming over the childhood of a bright, sensitive boy who always felt out of place amid instability. Tupac's childhood was a string of displacements and uncertainty. His family had no permanent home, constantly moving from the Bronx to Harlem, then to Baltimore, Maryland. It was in Baltimore, where Tupac lived from 1986 to 1988, that his artistic inclination began to reveal itself clearly. He was accepted into the prestigious Baltimore School for the Arts, majoring in theater and poetry. In class, Tupac didn't just study acting, he also wrote poetry, composed music, studied ballet, and even Shakespeare. It was there he met Jada Pinkett, a close classmate and future Hollywood star, who once said Tupac had two souls within him, one of a poet, one of a street warrior. However, Tupac never got to graduate. His family once again had to move, this time to Marin City, California. And that was a cruel turning point. Marin City had no art, no theater, no stage, only alleys filled with drugs, gangs, unemployment, and violence. Tupac abandoned poetry to survive by harsher means, selling drugs, dealing weapons, and immersing himself in what came to be known as thug life. But it was right there that the fire of creation within him reignited. Tupac began writing rap as a way to tell his story, and the stories of those like him, in a raw yet truthful language. Tupac once confided, "I wasn't born to live long. I was made to speak the things others are afraid to say." Those words weren't just a premonition. They were the red thread running through his entire life from the moment he was shackled in the womb behind prison walls to the time he lay unconscious in a hospital bed with a bullet through his chest. The people who killed Tupac may have pulled the trigger in 1996, but the motive had long been planted in his blood, in his circumstances, in the way this world treated a black child with vision and too many enemies, becoming the unquenchable flame of hip-hop. If the name Tupac Amaru Shakur was a declaration, then his music was the battlefield where he made it real. Through each beat, each rap line sharp as a blade cutting through lies, oppression, and prejudice. Tupac's career was not just a string of artistic successes. It was a journey of struggle. To survive, to be heard, to avoid becoming just another anonymous statistic in the system's record of devoured young black men. And it was along this journey that contradictions, dangers, and hatred began to accumulate, like gunpowder waiting to ignite, slowly leading him toward that fateful intersection in Las Vegas in 1996. After years of hardship in Marin City, Tupac left street life behind to pursue his passion for the arts. His first steps into the music industry weren't as a star, but as a backup dancer. In 1990, Tupac joined the rap group Digital Underground, known for their humorous style and party lyrics, as a backup performer who occasionally rapped. But no one can keep a genius in the background for long. Tupac quickly drew attention with his explosive stage energy and a rap style that blended street anger with emotional depth. In 1991, at age 20, he released his solo debut album Tupacalypse Now. The title referenced the war film Apocalypse Now, but its content was even more intense. Tupac didn't sing about clubs or money. He spoke of police brutality, racism, poverty, and the despair of youth abandoned by the system. The track Brenda's Got a Baby, about a 12-year-old girl raped and pregnant, sent chills through listeners. The album didn't have major hits, but it stirred strong public debate. Then, Vice President Dan Quayle criticized the album for inciting violence against police. Ironically, that very criticism made Tupac a household name across America. Commercial success came in 1993 with Strictly For My Niggaz, an album rich in social themes, but more accessible in sound. Keep Ya Head Up became an anthem for black women while I Get Around, pushed Tupac into the upper ranks of the charts. At the same time, Tupac began appearing in films. His debut role in Juice 1992 stunned critics, a rapper who acted with the nuance of a professional. Then came Poetic Justice, 1993, co-starring Janet Jackson, where Tupac proved he could not only rap but move audiences with his eyes, voice, and the pain behind his tough exterior. Yet the light could not hide the darkness within Tupac. As his career soared, his personal life grew stormy. He became entangled in lawsuits, from assault and illegal weapons possession to a sexual assault charge in 1994. While awaiting trial, Tupac was ambushed and shot 5 times in the lobby of a Manhattan building. He miraculously survived and appeared in court a few days later in a wheelchair bandana on his head, with a look that feared nothing. From that moment, Tupac believed he'd been betrayed. He suspected his former friend, Biggie Smalls, the notorious B.I.G., knew about the ambush but never warned him. That shattered trust ignited one of the fiercest battles in music history, East Coast versus West Coast. In 1995, Tupac was sentenced to 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison. And just when everyone thought his artistic journey had ended, another powerful figure entered the picture: Suge Knight, boss of Death Row Records. Knight visited Tupac in prison and offered to post $1.4 million bail if Tupac agreed to a 3-album contract. Locked in a cell, betrayed and abandoned by the world, Tupac seized the chance. He was released in late 1995 and immediately moved to the West Coast, joining Death Row, the label that had launched Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and gangsta rap legends. Just months later, in February 1996, Tupac released All Eyes on Me, hip-hop's first double album, with thunderous, defiant, rebellious sound. The track California Love became a West Coast rap anthem, while Ambition's Azarita and 2 of America's Most Wanted cemented Tupac's image as a beloved outlaw. The album sold over 5 million copies in its first year, elevating Tupac to unprecedented heights. But at the same time, tracks like Hit 'Em Up, which openly insulted Biggie and Bad Boy Records, drew even more blood into the feud. At a time when audiences saw Tupac as invincible, a quieter desire was growing within him, a yearning for peace. He wanted to leave Death Row, start his own label called Machiavelli Records, produce films, write scripts, and according to some close to him, even retreat from gangster life. But leaving Death Row was never going to be simple. His contract wasn't fulfilled, and Suge Knight, who had invested millions in Tupac, wasn't about to let go of his golden goose. Tupac worked relentlessly, like a man racing against death, filming, writing, recording dozens of tracks each week. In under a year, he had nearly completed the 3 albums for Death Row, as if he knew time was short. Then, on September 7, 1996, after a boxing match in Las Vegas, Tupac was ambushed and shot on the street. 6 days later, the legend was gone. Looking back at Tupac's career journey, from backstage dancer to hip-hop royalty, no one can deny that he had defied fate. But it was precisely those meteoric strides that drew so many enemies from street gangs, the media powerful moguls, to invisible specters like jealousy, hatred, and greed. Perhaps it was that dizzying speed of ascent and lyrics that dared to stab straight into the heart that brought him closer to the barrel of a killer's gun. Wealth and the price. Tupac had to pay. At the time, All Eyes on Me was dominating the charts, and Tupac was everywhere. From the silver screen to music magazines, from packed concerts to fiery beefs igniting the entire rap scene, people thought he was living a real-life dream. The mansion he rented in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles, was constantly buzzing with bodyguards, friends, lovers, and gangsters. His garage always had a few sleek black sports cars. Every time he appeared, Tupac wore at least 3 massive gold chains, like dog collars, glittering diamond rings, and custom Versace or leather outfits. He lived like a true hip-hop king, a man the whole world was watching with bated breath. But as the title of his album All Eyes on Me suggests, all eyes are on me, the price of living that way was anything but cheap. In Tupac's case, it was costlier than anyone imagined, not just in money, but in freedom control over his life and ultimately his very existence. From the moment he walked out of Clinton Correctional Facility in October 1995, Tupac began living under the rule of Death Row, the infamous record label run by Suge Knight. In exchange for the $1.4 million bail Suge paid to free him from prison, Tupac signed a 3-album contract with Death Row. On paper, it was a breakthrough collaboration. In reality, it was a deal with the devil, something Tupac only realized when it was far too late. The financial structure of Death Row was unlike any other record label. They fronted every cost for their artists, from studio time music videos housing cars and bodyguards to parties and even drugs, all meticulously recorded like itemized invoices and deducted directly from the artist's revenue, like high-interest loans wrapped in glitz. Within a year of his release from prison, Tupac had recorded over 150 songs, released 2 albums with All Eyes on Me, selling over 5 million copies in its first year, and starred in at least 3 feature films. He generated an estimated $60 million for Death Row, an enormous sum for any artist, especially in the pre-Spotify, pre-TikTok era. But strangely, Tupac had virtually nothing in his name. At the time of his death, his bank account held less than $185,000. He owned no property. The house in Los Angeles was rented, paid for, and owed back to Death Row. The 2 cars he used were company provided. The expensive jewelry, designer clothes, yachts, mansions, even his restaurant dinners, all were listed under Death Row's advance ledger. The company spent around $16,000 a month to support Tupac's lifestyle, but also added $16,000 each month to his growing debt. A hotel bill over $300,000 and exorbitant bodyguard fees were just 2 among hundreds of expenses Death Row sought to reclaim after Tupac's death. This harsh reality only came into full view after he was gone. His mother, Afeni Shakur, the same woman who had once stood trial for 21 terrorism charges and won by defending herself, became a fighter once more, this time to claim financial justice for her son. As she reviewed the financial records, she was nearly crushed. Tupac, whose songs played at parties from Los Angeles to Tokyo, didn't even own 1% of the rights to his own music. He had no will, No equity, no trust fund. Death Row claimed Tupac still owed them millions and that the company had no further obligations to his family. So what happened? How did one of the most talented artists in hip-hop history, a man who changed the course of pop culture, die nearly penniless? The answer lies in a deadly triangle of fame, dependence, and violence. Tupac was offered a high price to sign with Death Row, but the contract effectively made him the company's property. He had no personal legal team, no independent representation, and most importantly, no time to think, because everything came too fast. Prison release, non-stop recording stardom controversy feuds, and death. He was caught in a high-speed production machine, where every product labeled Tupac sold out while the real man behind it all spiraled out of control. Those close to Tupac recall that in his final months, he began to feel uneasy. He wanted to create his own label, Machiavelli Records, to gain autonomy. He wanted to find a lawyer to review his contract with Death Row. Some sources say he had a private conversation with Quincy Jones about a future independent partnership. But he didn't have the chance to act. Those signs of retreat, in a system that doesn't tolerate losing its assets, may have made him a target. Because in the Death Row model, Tupac wasn't just an artist, he was a massive investment. And an investment that thinks seeks freedom is a dangerous threat. The irony is cruel. Tupac could sing about violence, live in violence. But what ultimately killed him was a system wrapped in stage lights. A system that drained talent dry, turned artists into brands. And when they tried to break free, they either vanished or got shot in the street. 13 bullets and 6 days of agony. The sudden death of Tupac Shakur. If Tupac Shakur had ever sensed that death awaited him at the end of his road, then the night of September 7, 1996 was the fateful moment he could not escape. Las Vegas was packed that night. Neon lights never dimmed. Casinos spun endlessly, and everything felt like a masterfully staged play. But no one imagined that the most horrifying tragedy in American hip-hop was about to unfold. Not on stage, but in the middle of a city intersection beneath a cold red light. That evening, Tupac and Death Row boss Suge Knight went to the MGM Grand Casino to watch the boxing match between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon. Tupac was a devoted Tyson fan, and the event was the perfect opportunity to reappear in public after relentless weeks in studios and film sets. But just minutes after the fight ended, Tupac and his entourage, mostly members of the Bloods gang, got into a brawl. Security cameras captured the moment Tupac punched a young man in the face in the hotel hallway before the group jumped in and attacked together. The man assaulted was Orlando "Baby" Lane Anderson, a prominent member of the Crips in South Compton. According to witnesses, the conflict stemmed from a long-standing feud between the Crips and Bloods, especially after Anderson had allegedly stolen a Death Row chain a few weeks prior. Tupac wasn't just involved. He led the charge, shouted through the first punch, and walked away as if nothing had happened. But that impulsive moment may have been the reason he was shot just hours later. At 11 p.m., Tupac was in the passenger seat of a black BMW driven by Suge Knight. They were heading to Club 662, a newly opened Death Row nightclub. Behind them was a convoy of bodyguards and friends. As the car stopped at a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Covell Lane, a white Cadillac silently pulled up on the right. The window rolled down. A figure in the back seat raised a hand, and in a flash, 13 shots rang out into the night like reversed fireworks. Not a celebration, but a farewell. 4 bullets struck Tupac. One pierced his right lung, one hit his pelvis. Another shattered his thigh bone, and one passed through his hand. Blood-sprayed glass shattered, and Suga, grazed in the head by a fragment, sped the car away in a panic. Ironically, in the middle of a crowded street under glaring lights and in front of dozens of witnesses, no one could clearly identify the shooter. It all seemed orchestrated to happen quickly, precisely, and leave no trace. Tupac was rushed to the University Medical Center of Nevada in critical condition. Doctors performed emergency surgery, removing one lung to stop the bleeding. For the next 6 days, Tupac remained in a coma. Each day, hundreds of fans gathered outside the hospital, praying, singing, crying. But he never woke up. On the afternoon of September 13, 1996, chillingly the 7th day since the shooting, Tupac died from internal bleeding and respiratory failure, ending a life of just 25 years. That was enough to make him an immortal legend. Las Vegas police launched an investigation, but everything from the start was tangled like a maze. No clear footage captured the attacker's license plate. Witnesses, mostly Bloods members or death row affiliates, refused to cooperate, made excuses, or disappeared. The only person who might have identified the shooter, Yafeu Fula, Tupac's close friend and fellow rapper in Outlaws, was shot dead 2 months later in New Jersey in an unrelated incident. The death of the sole witness sent the case spiraling downward. The police's confusion only fueled suspicions. Why didn't they immediately arrest Orlando Anderson, despite clear motive and evidence of the earlier assault? Why didn't they keep the surveillance footage longer than 7 days to examine the Cadillac's plates? Why did it take nearly 3 decades for someone to finally be arrested? Was this case really just street-level revenge? In the years that followed, dozens of theories emerged. Tupac was killed by the Crips in retaliation. Tupac was eliminated by Suge Knight because he wanted to leave death row. Tupac was a casualty in the secret war between Bad Boy and Death Row. Some even claimed Tupac never died. But of all the possibilities, one thing no one denies: the fight at MGM Grand was the first domino. And whoever really pulled the trigger, the silence that followed was even more terrifying. At the hospital, when a nurse asked Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, if she wanted to keep the body for burial, she quietly replied, "No. My baby is gone. Let him be free." Tupac's ashes were later scattered in a private ceremony. No gravestone, no burial site. It was as if he had prepared for a vanishing exit long ago. In his music videos, poetry, and the silent final glances people still speak of today, Tupac died the way he lived, in the spotlight, amid chaos, surrounded by unanswered questions. But the most disturbing, most painful part was that his death wasn't a surprise to him. In many songs he had written, "If I die tonight, no, I saw it coming." And perhaps that's what keeps people asking, who killed Tupac? Or more accurately, why was someone like Tupac, simply for daring to live authentically, to say what others only dared think, sentenced to death in a crowded street in plain light, and no one could save him? Who really killed Tupac? 5 theories and nearly 30 years of investigation. 6 days after being shot on a Las Vegas street, Tupac Shakur took his last breath in his mother's arms, leaving behind an immortal musical legacy and an unsolved mystery. People often say that with legends, death is never the end. With Tupac, that has never rung truer. When his heart stopped beating, the feverish hunt for the truth had only just begun. Nearly 3 decades have passed, and millions still repeat the question, who really killed Tupac? The answer winds through a maze with 5 pathways, 5 major theories, each leading into a different shadowy realm. Theory number 1. Orlando Anderson and Crips gang retaliation. The most widely accepted theory among independent investigators and former police officers is that Tupac was murdered in a direct act of revenge by the Compton Crips gang. The story begins with the assault at the MGM Grand on the night of September 7, 1996, just hours before Tupac was shot. Surveillance footage shows Tupac, Suge Knight, and their entourage attacking a young man in the hotel hallway. The victim was 21-year-old Orlando "Baby" Lane Anderson, a known Crips member with a criminal record who had reportedly stolen a death row chain from one of Tupac's associates weeks earlier. That public beating, captured on camera in front of hundreds, was an unforgivable offense to the Crips. That very night, according to street informants, an emergency meeting was held in South Compton among Crips members. Dwayne "Keffy D. Davis, a Crips kingpin with deep ties to Southern California's criminal underworld, was said to be the mastermind behind the ambush to settle the score with Tupac. In the white Cadillac, later identified by police, there were 4 men: Keffy D in the front passenger seat, an unknown driver, and in the back, Orlando Anderson and an accomplice armed with a .40 Glock. When Tupac's car stopped at the intersection of Flamingo and Koval, the Cadillac pulled up beside it. Anderson, according to Keffy D's later confession, grabbed the gun and shouted, "Let me shoot him." Then came 13 gunshots. In 2009, as part of a proffer agreement to avoid prosecution, Keffy D told police he was in the car and that Anderson was the shooter. However, without physical evidence, and with Anderson having been killed in 1998 in another gang-related shooting, the case remained unchargeable for years. That changed in 2023. Las Vegas police raided Keffy D's home, seizing documents, photos, and bullet casings possibly tied to the 1996 shooting. In late September 2023, Keffe D was arrested and charged with murder under aggravating circumstances, organized ambush illegal firearms. For the first time in 27 years, someone in that Cadillac, and believed to be the mastermind, stood before a court. His trial is expected in late 2024, and if convicted, Keffe D could face life in prison. Theory number 2, Suge Knight, the boss who killed his star. Suge Knight, the infamous CEO of Death Row Records, was sitting right next to Tupac when the shooting happened. He was driving the car and was even grazed by a bullet fragment. At first glance, this would seem to rule him out. But his very presence has sparked one of the most controversial theories: was Suga either directly involved or complicit? The suggested motive is nothing new: financial gain. Under his contract with Death Row, Tupac owed 3 albums in exchange for the $1.4 million bail Suge paid to free him from prison. After releasing the double album All Eyes on Me, Tupac needed just one more to fulfill the deal. He had also begun laying the groundwork for his own label, Machiavelli Records, which meant he would leave Death Row taking with him his name, unreleased material, and millions in future revenue. For someone like Suge Knight, rumored to have ties to criminal networks and a history of using violence to control his artists, losing Tupac, his golden goose, was unthinkable. Some former Death Row employees speaking anonymously later revealed that tensions had been rising between Tupac and Suge in the months before the murder. Just a week before he was shot, Tupac allegedly told his bodyguard he was leaving Death Row as soon as possible. A widely discussed documentary, Biggie and Tupac, by Nick Broomfield, also hints at Suge's involvement in both murders. Former LAPD investigator Russell Poole claimed there was evidence Suge used corrupt cops to orchestrate the killings of Tupac and Biggie to maintain control of Death Row and profit after their deaths. However, the evidence remained speculative and lacked the material weight to prosecute. The biggest weakness of this theory is, why would Suge put himself in the line of fire? Sitting next to Tupac, he could easily have been fatally shot too, unless the hit was executed with surgical precision, a possibility that, if true, has never been proven. Furthermore, Suge has never been officially investigated for involvement in Tupac's murder. Despite widespread suspicion, he has remained silent for years, until being imprisoned for an unrelated charge, vehicular manslaughter, in 2015. Theory number 3, a government or FBI conspiracy. From the beginning, many of Tupac's fans, and not a few social activists, believed his death wasn't random, but the result of a political conspiracy. Tupac wasn't just a rapper, he was a symbol of black resistance with influence far beyond music. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was a member of the Panther 21, a group closely monitored by the FBI. His stepfather, Mutulu Shakur, was on the federal most wanted list. His godmother, Assata Shakur, was wanted for killing a cop and has lived in exile in Cuba. The Shakur family, to put it bluntly, was the US government's worst nightmare. Supporters of this theory argue that Tupac knew too much, spoke too honestly, and held too much sway. Songs like Trapped Changes and White Man's World expressed bold political views, condemning police, the justice system, and systemic racism. They believe Tupac had become a threat, and eliminating him was a preemptive strike before the spark became a wildfire. However, there is no public evidence backing this theory. The FBI did have files on Tupac, but that was common for major artists at the time. No official investigation has ever leaked information linking the government to his death. As such, this theory remains more of a cultural declaration, the black community's rage towards systemic power, than a legally grounded accusation. Theory number 4, Diddy and the secret war between record labels. A darker extension of the Crips theory points to Sean Diddy Combs, aka Puff Daddy, CEO of Bad Boy Records, as the one who allegedly hired the Crips to kill Tupac. The motive, simple: the bloody rivalry between two hip-hop empires, Bad Boy in New York and Death Row in Los Angeles. Investigative journalist Chuck Phillips' LA Times once published a bombshell report citing informants who claimed Diddy had offered $1 million to anyone who could take care of Tupac and Suge. Keffe D, in his 2019 memoir, confirmed he had attended a meeting in Beverly Hills where a Bad Boy representative promised payment if Tupac was eliminated. Diddy has repeatedly denied the accusation. In interviews, he stated he had no knowledge of and no connection to any plan to kill Tupac. Las Vegas police have never officially considered him a suspect. Some believe this was merely an attack by rivals aiming to damage Diddy's credibility as the East Coast rap mogul. Still, the Bad Boy Death Row feud was very real. Hit 'Em Up, Tupac's most infamous diss track, targeted both Biggie and Diddy with unprecedented venom. And just 6 months after Tupac's death, Biggie was gunned down on a Los Angeles street. 2 murders, 2 coasts, 2 young stars, and no convictions. That's enough to keep the corporate war theory alive. Theory Ziegler 5. Tupac faked his death and is still alive. The strangest, but most persistent theory in internet culture is that Tupac never died. Supporters believe he staged the assassination to escape fame, hatred, and the traps of the music industry. They cite various clues Tupac adopted the name Machiavelli, after Italian strategist Machiavelli, who wrote in favor of faking one's death to deceive enemies. The cover of The Don Killuminati, the 7-Day Theory released posthumously, depicts Tupac on a cross like Jesus, implying symbolic death. Many claim to have seen Tupac in Cuba, Jamaica, or even Scotland. They point to the absence of a grave, no public funeral, and the scattering of ashes as ways to erase the trail. While compelling this theory lacks legal basis, Tupac has a death certificate, was pronounced dead at the hospital, and his mother was present in the ICU. The coroner's report is valid. If alive, Tupac would have had to remain hidden for nearly 30 years, something even the most skilled faked death figures in history rarely achieved. In short, it's part of the legend, not an active investigation. The clues Tupac left behind. Tupac Shakur was never afraid of death. He spoke of it like an old friend, one who always watched him from afar, waiting for the final moment to embrace him with a mocking smile. In interviews, songs, poetry, music videos, and even in his lifestyle, Tupac left behind countless signs suggesting he foresaw the day he would be killed. These clues, once seen as mere artistic flourishes, became chillingly haunting after his death. And if anyone truly wants to know who killed Tupac, they should first listen to him. Because perhaps Tupac already told us. We just refuse to believe. From his earliest albums, Tupac expressed an obsession with death, not vaguely, but in stark detail. The song If I Die Tonight, released in 1995 on Me Against the World, begins with a cold monologue. They're ready to kill you for a few bucks a chain or the wrong look. If I die tonight. Followed by a hook that sounds like a spine-chilling prophecy. Bury me with my gun in hand and don't let them take my soul. A year later, Tupac was shot to death. Not for money, not for fame, but perhaps because of a wrong look, a wrong punch, and a soul that refused to be tamed. In so many tears, he wrote, "I've seen death close up. I've talked to the Reaper in my sleep. And only God can judge me." He confided, "I feel like I can't go on. I'm writing my will in music. Every song is a farewell." These weren't just typical violent rap lines. They were the confessions of a man living amid gunfire, hatred, and betrayal. Even in his final recordings, like Blasphemy and Hail Mary from the Don Killuminati, the 7-Day Theory released after his death, his words became darker, more prophetic. In Blasphemy, Tupac raps, "Every night I dream of bleeding in the street. I feel the cold wind behind me, like death, whispering." Perhaps no rapper in history has ever written lyrics that seem so clearly to foreshadow his own end. But the songs were not the only signs. The music video for I Ain't Mad at Cha, released just days after Tupac's death, is one of the most eerie moments. In the video, Tupac plays a man who leaves a party after turning his life around, only to be suddenly gunned down in the street. His soul rises to heaven playing piano in a dim, glowing space, while his friends grieve silently at his grave. Viewers were stunned to learn that the video had been filmed before Tupac died, not after, because the scene was disturbingly accurate, a visual prophecy, a self-directed artistic funeral. People still ask, how could Tupac shoot a video that mirrored his own death so perfectly? And if it was mere coincidence, why did every detail, the location, the outfit, the gunshots, the lighting, align so eerily with reality? Beyond music, Tupac also left behind poetry and personal journals. many of which repeated the theme of preparing to leave. In his poetry collection, The Rose That Grew from Concrete, Tupac wrote, "I live like there's no tomorrow because I've seen too many fall. If I go early, remember I was the light in your darkness." In another poem, "In the event of my demise," he stated clearly, "If I die, please know it wasn't unexpected. I was just a warrior whose mission was done." Even the alias Machiavelli he used for his final album sparked a frenzy among fans. The name alludes to Niccolò Machiavelli, the Italian philosopher who suggested that faking one's death could be a strategic move to deceive enemies. In the rap community, this instantly became a hint that Tupac had staged his death. The album title, The 7-Day Theory, further fueled the theory since Tupac was shot on September 7th and died on September 13th, exactly 7 days later. Some fans even claimed that rearranging the letters in Machiavelli gives you Am-Alive K, a hidden code within a bullet casing. Then came the wave of Tupac sightings. Rumors spread that he had been taken to Cuba with his godmother Assata Shakur, who had fled there for political asylum. Some claimed to have seen Tupac in Jamaica or at a flea market in South Africa. One man claiming to be Tupac's former bodyguard even posted a video saying he had helped him escape. Despite the lack of evidence, these stories never die, as if the collective mind refuses to let go of the hope that Tupac is still out there writing music, living in hiding, waiting for the day to return. What about reality? Medical authorities confirmed Tupac's death. The hospital released a report. His ashes were scattered with no grave. Those closest to him, his mother, close friends, colleagues, all believed he was truly gone. And yet, what remains, in his music, his poetry, his videos and interviews, is a mosaic of overlapping clues, forming a silhouette that refuses to fade. An artist who left too many signs, as if purposefully leading the public to one final question. If I die, will you understand why? Tupac is gone, but the question who really killed him still lingers, unanswered. The clues he left behind might be the key, if we have the patience to piece them together. Who do you think pulled the trigger? Leave a comment, follow the channel, and join us as we continue the journey in search of the truth. Tupac may be silent, but justice is not.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore. Stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.